The abyssal monarch's words felt like the voice of heaven, shaking the soul and stunning the people beyond their wildest imaginations. A pure child of darkness. The highest, greatest people of the abyss were gathered here in Eden's crown today. So they knew very well what this meant. According to the records of dark, profound energy, it referred to someone with perfect affinity and mastery of dark, profound energy. A pure body of darkness that only existed in the records before today. Without exaggeration, such a person had never existed in the history of the abyss. Who would have thought that Pan Bueng, former owl-butterfly divine son who was deposed, and even subsequently tossed out of the owl-butterfly kingdom of God like trash, would accomplish an unprecedented miracle of darkness that earned even the attention of the abyssal monarch? Pan Yusheng took a step forward. He was the prey eternal divine regent, and yet his throat bobbed up and down chaotically, and the corners of his mouth were visibly twitching against his will. Despite all this, he could not make a single sound. As for the owl-butterfly experts behind him, their expressions could only be described as terribly diverse and utterly spectacular. Wearing a perfectly reasonable look of surprise and curiosity, Yun Qi asked Meng Kongqun in a low tone, "Can you give me an idea of how rare this pure child of darkness is, senior?" Meng Kongqun responded simply, "It is unprecedented in the past or the present." Shock bloomed across Yun Qi's face. A while later, he said softly, "Does that mean that the owl-butterfly kingdom of God has tossed away a bright pearl that would have made history with their own hands?" Actually, scratch that. After today, the owl-butterfly kingdom of God's attitude toward Pan Bueng is going to change dramatically. They will most likely appoint a new divine son. Meng Kongqun slowly shook his head and sighed quietly. Unfortunately, Owl Butterfly went too far and did too much for Pan Bujuo. The things they did to Pan Bueng, they have cut off that possible future with their own hands. The abyssal monarch's eyes were still firmly glued to Pan Bueng, but a closer look would reveal that he wasn't actually looking at his face or his eyes. He was really staring at the natural darkness wafting above his head. It's so pure, so gentle and calm. There are even traces of original nether. Are you blessing me in your dreams? Is this a sign that you will soon return? I knew it, I knew it. This must mean that the eternal Pure Land is the final end of this abyss of dreams. Pan Bueng, the abyssal monarch spoke up again in the same gentle voice as before, "I have heard a little about your story. I can empathize with your pain and sorrow as well. Maybe you are naturally talented, or maybe the grayish despair you experienced was so deep that it culminated in the miracle of darkness you are experiencing right now." He did not ask when or what cultivation level Pan Bueng was at when he achieved perfect compatibility with darkness. Maybe the answer wasn't important, or perhaps he did not wish to hear an answer that went against his hopes and expectations. "You have fulfilled a wish this lone one thought would never be fulfilled. This lone one is delighted. As such, this lone one promises to fulfill one wish for you. If there is anything you would like to wish for, then say it. So long as it does not harm the natural order, then this lone one will satisfy it." For a time, silent gasps appeared all over the place. This was a promise from the abyssal monarch himself, and he had given it in front of everyone. It was a kind of honor and favor that countless divine children dared not even dream of obtaining in their lifetimes. The blood drained from Pan Bujuo's face instantly. The expressions of the members of Owl Butterfly also became a million times more colorful and varied than before. They could already predict what Pan Bueng's greatest desire was: to regain his identity as the Owl Butterfly divine son, to become the one and only. Otherwise, why would he go so far as to enter the Pure Land via the Star and Moon Kingdom of God? Why would he backstab Sha Xing and fight for the honor of Owl Butterfly? His objective was as clear as day at this point, and the abyssal monarch's promise was the nail in the coffin. Even if that wasn't the case, Pan Bueng was currently the possessor of a miraculous body of darkness, the awe-inspiring achievement of victory over the twin stars, and even the mild but irrefutable attention of the abyssal monarch. Who in the world dared to say that Pan Bueng did not possess the right to replace Pan Bujuo even if his divine essence was poorer than the latter's? As expected, Pan Bueng looked terribly agitated after hearing the abyssal monarch's promise. His body trembled, and his voice trembled harder as he spoke. "The reason Bueng did everything I could to enter the Pure Land, and even go so far as to reveal my hidden skills, is all to earn some favor with Father, and obtain just one item." He half-turned in Pan Yusheng's direction and met his father's gaze briefly. Then he slowly bowed his head and said slowly, "I ask that you give me Pan Yusheng's complexion was ashen, and Pan Bujuo's face was positively bloodless. In fact, the owl-butterfly divine son was swaying a little as if he could faint at any moment. After becoming the owl-butterfly divine son, he resorted to all sorts of unspeakable methods to utterly remove the potential threat that Pan Buweng posed. In the end, he was able to die the man in total despair, and even exile him from the owl-butterfly kingdom of God. He never dreamed that the potential threat he thought he removed completely would somehow make a comeback, much less one as absolute as this. It was blindingly obvious what was going to happen after Pan Buweng made a comeback. He was going to, the forever bond you made with Mother. When the two of you wed, Pan Yusheng's expression froze instantly, a ray of absent-mindedness and bewilderment shooting out of his eyes. Every owl-butterfly member was stunned. Pan Bujuo stopped trembling and froze from head to toe, as if he had just heard the most ridiculous thing in the entire world. This was truly an answer that no one had anticipated. The Abyssal Monarch's expression did not change. He asked indifferently, "Is that all you want?" Pan Buweng answered without hesitation. Once upon a time, Buweng sought to end it all. However, that is no longer the case. Now I only wish to spend the rest of my life with something to guide my heart and will. Everything I could have inherited from Mother, besides the Chang Zheng of the Silent Night, was destroyed. The only thing that still exists is the forever bond. It also contains the last wisp of her soul, the only wisp that still exists in this world. Facing toward Pan Yusheng, Pan Buweng dropped to one knee and bowed his head deeply. Very well. In 2 words, the Abyssal Monarch had made Pan Yusheng's choice for him. Yusheng! The monarch looked at the prey eternal divine regent and said 2 words. He didn't give an order, but it was an irrefutable order all the same. Without a word, Pan Yusheng reached into his portable space and pulled out what looked like a dot of black light. Then he pushed it in Pan Buweng's direction. Pan Buweng stumbled and nearly pounced toward the dot of black light on all 4s. He hurriedly yet carefully caught the dot of black light in his hands. It was a small and delicate jade bond. At the center of the jade bond was a tiny soul crystal that glimmered weakly. The forever bond was sealed into a soul thread during the wedding of a man and woman of the owl-butterfly kingdom of God. It symbolized the eternal bond of their hearts and souls. However, Pan Yusheng's soul thread was missing from the forever bond. He had either removed it earlier or just now. Sensing the soul presence belonging to his mother, so weak yet so warm, Pan Buweng instantly burst into tears. Hands trembling, he slowly pressed the tiny jade bond against his solar plexus so hard it was as if he was trying to mold it into his heart. At that moment, the emotional outburst touched everyone. It was simply impossible for this to be an act or some sort of deception. Pan Buweng, he truly just wanted to obtain and preserve the final wisp of his mother's soul. Thank you for bestowing this favor. Your Majesty, thank you for giving me this. Father. Right now, every word he spoke was shuddering with tears. Coming from the man who showed no emotion whatsoever even when he defeated the twin stars in an instant, it said a lot of things. Even the anger and humiliation residing in Sha Xing's eyes earlier had been replaced by something indescribably complex. As soon as the command was given, Pan Buweng found himself lifted to his feet by a gentle but irresistible force. Looking at the tear stains on his face, the Abyssal Monarch asked, "Where will you be going next, Pan Buweng?" The fact that the Abyssal Monarch was asking this implied an offer. If Pan Buweng said, "I wish to remain in the Pure Land," then the Abyssal Monarch would accept it for sure. Hands pressed together and holding the last bit of warmth that existed in this world, Pan Buweng whispered, "Buweng has fulfilled his wish and no longer has a reason to impose on the Pure Land, so this is where I will take my leave." He bowed deeply to the Abyssal Monarch, voice free yet determined. The Abyssal Monarch nodded. Before the young man left, he gave him one last piece of advice. Never submit to fate, no matter what circumstances you are facing. With that, Pan Buweng left Eden's crown. There was no hesitation or yearning in his body language whatsoever. However, the feelings he stirred in everyone's heart would not fade until a very, very long time later. Yusheng! The Abyssal Monarch looked straight ahead and spoke in a voice that reached the top of the clouds. This lone one has never desired to get involved with another person's karma, much less interfere with another family's business. I only hope that you will not regret your choices. Pan Yusheng bowed respectfully to him. Yusheng receives your guidance. Yun Qi narrowed his eyes slightly and hid a sigh of relief. As expected, the abyssal monarch did not say anything even though he surely must have noticed Pan Buwang's perfect divine essence. It was because the pure body of darkness was the one thing that truly deserved his attention. The rest, well, it did not deserve his comments, to put it mildly. Yun Qi preferred it this way. It wasn't like this pleasant surprise could not be revealed at this time, but it would be far more effective if it were revealed at a later date. Inside the barrier, the plainly dressed Shen Wuyi was still carrying herself with an air of lofty, lonely dignity. Meng Jiangxi took a step forward and said unhurriedly, "I will face her." However, Yun Qi immediately grabbed his arm and said, "There is no hurry. You can decide whether you want to enter after watching a match." "Why not?" Although Meng Jiangxi was astonished, he saw no reason to refute Yun Qi's words. Meanwhile, the owl butterfly kingdom of God was still drowning in a bizarre atmosphere. At some point, the old man standing behind Pan Yusheng finally lost his cool and sent his divine regent a sound transmission. "Are we seriously not going to pursue Pan Buwang, Supreme One?" Pan Yusheng let out a cold harumph. "He's just posturing. I'm sure he's waiting for us to ask him to return. Leave him be. We can look for him in an hour. Maybe only half an hour. He won't have gone far." At the same time, Sha Xing suddenly clenched his teeth and left the scene at high speed. Xian Yue subconsciously reached out to catch him, but he thought better and withdrew his arm halfway. Wushan Xing was frowning slightly, but just like Xian Yue, he chose against commanding Sha Xing to come back. It was at this moment Shen Wuyi finally chose an opponent. Eyes staring straight at the boundless kingdom of God's formation, she declared, "I have long heard of the #1 divine son. I request your guidance." Pan Buwang wasn't just leaving Eden's crown, he was leaving the Pure Land altogether. Chest filled with excitement for having obtained his mother's final personal belonging, and more profound fear and respect toward his master, he didn't stop for even an instant. He was less than 50 kilometers from the boundary of the Pure Land when an unexpected voice called out to him. "Brother Buwang!" Pan Buwang gradually slowed to a stop, but he did not turn around. His back facing toward Sha Xing, he said indifferently, "You treated me as a friend and helped me a lot, and yet I used you as a stepping stone. Therefore, you no longer need to address me as Brother Buwang." "Brother Buwang." Despite what he said, Sha Xing continued to address Pan Buwang as a brother. The anger and scorn that resided in his eyes during their earlier combat were gone, replaced by sincerity and purity that were exactly the same as before their fallout. "I was consumed by anger earlier and lost all of my reason. I have said too many things that hurt you deeply." Pan Buwang. "Now that I have regained my calm, I finally understand that you weren't planning to use me as a stepping stone to return to the owl butterfly kingdom of God. On the contrary, knowing how deep your love for your mother runs, there is simply no way that you are a cold and heartless person." Pan Buwang finally turned around to face Sha Xing, but there was no emotion in his eyes whatsoever. "What are you trying to say? Or more accurately, what are you trying to prove?" Sha Xing sucked in a deep breath before beginning. "Do you still remember how we came to be friends, Brother Buwang? You had injured one of your own to protect the ordinary citizens of a land of the living. You had admitted your mistake and apologized to me without hesitation. You are also the only one who dared to befriend the eternal night divine daughter, Shen Wuqing, so that she would not be alone. I was delighted to become your friend. My image of you has never faded after you lost your status as a divine son. More than anything, I want to believe that a person's true nature does not change easily. So, Brother Buwang, you must never do something like giving up on yourself or committing an act that you know you will regret. If you ever need my help, even if it's just to serve as your stepping stone again, please do not hesitate to seek me out. If it's you, 1 time, 10 times, I will not hesitate to help you." Sha Xing knew Pan Buwang's greatest secret. He knew that his master was the Fog Monarch. So when Pan Buwang surprised everyone by not using the Abyssal Monarch's wish to ask to return to the Owl Butterfly Kingdom of God, Sha Xing immediately had a vague, unsettling feeling that Pan Buwang was willingly sinking himself into a terrible, dark abyss. Pan Buwang's response to Sha Xing's kind words was to let out a cold, ugly bark of laughter. "Allow me to ask you a question, Divine Son Xing," he said coldly. "Have you ever experienced being stomped into the smelliest, rottingest swamp for 1,400 hours by over 100 people?" Sha Xing froze. "I have. It happened right in front of my mother's grave. I could not put on even a sliver of resistance because they would shatter the gravestone I just carved for my mother otherwise." Sha Xing's breathing grew heavy, and his mouth opened and closed wordlessly like a fish. He did not know what to say. Letter 1D4, 1F, letter 1D4, 2B, letter 1D5, 5, 6, letter 1D5, F2, letter 1D6, 0, 4, letter 1D6, AT. Letter 1D5, 5, 4, letter 1D5, 6, 0, letter 1D4, 2, 6. Pan Buwang's mouth split into a chilling smile. He then raised his little finger and covered it with his hand, so only the barest tip was poking out of the surface. This is but the tiniest wisp of humiliation I have received throughout the years. But why? Sha Xing subconsciously asked. Just what kind of terrible grudge exists between you and Pan Buzuo for him to treat you like this after he became the divine son? That's a good question. Pan Buwang's smile grew even more ridiculing. Unfortunately, the answer is nothing. This all happened purely because I am a potential threat. Let's use you as an example, Star Divine Son. You've grown accustomed to being the noble and unparalleled Divine Son for a long time, haven't you? Can you accept suddenly losing it all one day? Sha Xing could not say the words. I can. Pan Buwang continued. I am the Owl Butterfly Kingdom of God's first divine son of this generation. I grew up in a shower of flattery and praise. I was accustomed to all this and believed that this was how the world should be. I believed my life would never change. The only potential threats I was ever concerned about were cultivation bottlenecks and father's disappointment. Now that I think back, how foolish and laughable I was. However, Pan Buzuo is my successor. He understands what a potential threat truly is, and he is afraid that he will one day be replaced. He is afraid that I, like all the latent God-bearers who awakened their divine essence after they were born, would surpass him, even if the possibility of this happening is minuscule. That is why he gave everything he could to wipe out the greatest potential threat to his position, me. He could not kill me, but he could take everything away from me. He could wipe out everything I ever depended on and even destroy me mentally and spiritually. Is that all? Sha Xing murmured in disbelief. Yes, that is all. Pan Buwang continued in an indifferent tone. Do you know why not a single man or woman in Owl Butterfly is able to smile even though I defeated you and the Moon Divine Son and earned the kingdom of God an unprecedented amount of face? It's because too many of them. Maybe it was themselves. Maybe it was their children. Or maybe it was their juniors, partook in my trampling in order to curry favor with Pan Buzuo. All these so-called brothers and sisters who used to admire me, curry favor with me, and praise me changed their faces into something utterly unrecognizable overnight. Heh, heh, he laughed. It was a cold, terrible laugh. There is one thing I must give Pan Buzuo, though. His methods are beyond vile, and he deserves to die 1,000,000 deaths for doing it, but there is no question how effective they are. After all, even though I had gained the qualifications to surpass him, there is no one in Owl Butterfly who would dare to make me a divine son once more, would they? My father, Pan Buwang interrupted whatever Sha Xing was trying to say. The father who once showered me with love and care only had a few harmless rebukes to offer my abusers. Later, he did not even bother to rebuke them. Later still, I was the one who was rebuked. In the end, well, you know what happened. The diverse faces of humanity are truly interesting, aren't they? Sha Xing. Wuking was the only thing keeping my spirit intact during the most difficult time of my life, and she died. Have you ever known what it's like to have your faith crumble into nothing, Star Divine Son? This feeling that everything in the world had turned into gray. It is most curious. Oh, sorry. I forgot that your beloved is the 13th princess of the Shining Star Realm, and your love for each other is as deep as it is reciprocated. Now that I think about it, your wedding date is near, isn't it? I should not be talking about such inauspicious things. Sha Xing raised his hand, but his throat was parched. Have you ever experienced the helplessness and despair of your father doing everything in his power to protect your mother's murderer, even though he knew full well that she was murdered, and who did it? Have you ever known how painful it is to see your mother's belongings being destroyed one by one, unable to do anything to stop it? You can stir up my insides with your heavenly wolf holds a star, and I promise you it cannot hold a candle to even an instant of what I felt at those moments. Enough. Enough already? Sha Xing's hands started shaking slightly. Just listening to Pan Buwang's words and imagining himself in his shoes for even an instant was enough to make him cease all such imaginations forever. Pan Buwang turned his back on Sha Xing once more. So, for someone who is still a divine son, whose parents and beloved are still alive and well, whose greatest pitfall in his life is just getting injured in the endless fog. What right do you have to console me? And who gave you the gall to say that a person's nature would not change easily? Sha Xing's eyes were utterly blank at this point. Pan Buwang's chest heaved heavily for a moment. When he spoke once more, his voice became even and gentle. That said, do not hesitate to enjoy your nobility and innocence, star divine son. I hope there will never be a day when you have no choice but to shed your innocence and goodness. He took one step forward before stopping in his tracks again. Here is one last piece of advice for you. Do not try to approach me again, and definitely do not morally kidnap yourself with our so-called bond. You shouldn't, and I am not worth it. Pan Buweng sped off toward the horizon once more. He was gone in just the blink of an eye. Sha Xing did not chase after him. He simply stood where he was for a very, very long time. At Eden's crown, Diane Jiaji slowly stepped out of the group. All eyes were on the number one divine son. No one, including himself, expected someone to challenge him this quickly. Although this was a battle between divine children, and the combatants would be fighting on the same cultivation level, Diane Jiaji was still the oldest and most powerful of them all. His profound accumulation, experience, and knowledge far exceeded any other divine child. In other words, assuming that their cultivation levels were equal, Diane Jiaji was unquestionably invincible no matter who he faced.